Elena stepped off the small-town bus with a quiet, tired look in her eyes. The air felt different here, lighter, calmer, untouched by the noise and pressure she had known for so long. She stood still for a moment, holding her single suitcase in one hand, while the soft wind brushed against her face. She had come a long way, not in distance, but in emotion. She wasn't running from danger, and she wasn't hiding from anyone. She was simply trying to escape the heavy memories that used to follow her everywhere she went. The quiet countryside town stretched before her with dusty roads, small wooden houses, and fields so wide that the horizon felt endless. It was the kind of place where days passed slowly, where people woke up early and slept peacefully at night. Elena hoped that maybe, just maybe, this peaceful place could help her heal. Her heart had been carrying the weight of broken promises and disappointing relationships. Each time she trusted someone, she ended up feeling more alone than before. She had reached a point where she no longer wanted to explain her pain, defend her choices, or pretend she was fine. So she decided to leave the old life behind, packing only what she needed, and promising herself that she would start over somewhere, far from the noise of her past. The small ranch outside the town needed temporary help, and Elena had seen the job posting online. She had no experience with ranch work, no background in countryside life, and no idea what to expect, but she needed a place where no one knew her history, a place where she wouldn't be questioned, a place where she could breathe without feeling watched or judged. She called a taxi from the tiny station, and an elderly driver picked her up with a polite nod. The car moved slowly down the long road that led to the ranch. As fields stretched endlessly on both sides, Elena felt something inside her chest loosen, as if the silence itself was pulling out the tension she had carried for years. The driver talked casually, telling her how the town was small enough that everyone knew each other but big enough that no one interfered in private matters. Elena liked the sound of that. She didn't want people digging into her story. She didn't want sympathy or questions. She just wanted a quiet space to rebuild herself. When they arrived at the ranch, she stepped out and stared at the open land. Horses grazed lazily near the fences. A barn stood to the right, red paint slightly worn from years under the sun. The ranch house was simple but warm, with a wide porch that looked perfect for sitting in the evenings. She took a deep breath and walked toward the entrance. Mrs. Avery, the ranch owner, greeted her with a welcoming smile. She was a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a gentle voice. She introduced herself, shook Elena's hand warmly, and offered her a place to stay in one of the small rooms inside the house. The room was basic but comfortable: a bed, a dresser, a window that opened toward the fields. It felt safe, and that was all Elena wanted. Mrs. Avery explained the daily chores: feeding the animals, helping in the stable, assisting with organizing supplies, and doing simple tasks around the property. It sounded manageable. Elena listened carefully, nodding at each instruction, wanting to show that she was willing to work hard. As she settled into the room, she looked out the window and watched the horses moving slowly across the field. She felt a strange sense of calm wash over her. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel rushed. She didn't feel pressured. She didn't feel like she had to pretend. This place was nothing like the life she left behind. There were no loud arguments, no broken expectations, no painful reminders of people who said they cared but walked away when she needed them most. Here, there was only quiet air, open sky, and the chance to be someone new. Elena unpacked the few clothes she had brought and arranged them neatly. She placed her small journal on the bedside table. It had been her silent companion for years, holding her thoughts and fears, the things she couldn't tell anyone. She hoped that the next pages would be filled with something brighter, something lighter than before. Later that afternoon, Mrs. Avery guided her around the ranch, showing her the different areas. The fields stretched far, meeting the sky like a soft painting. The barn smelled of hay and wood, a natural scent that felt oddly comforting. Chickens wandered near the fence, pecking at the ground. Dogs rested lazily near the porch, lifting their heads only when someone walked by. Elena felt small but at peace in the middle of all this open space. She tried to hide the heaviness in her heart, but Mrs. Avery noticed the quiet sadness behind her smiles. She didn't ask about it, though something Elena appreciated more than she could express. She wasn't ready to share her story. She wasn't ready to talk about the disappointments or the trust she had lost. She just wanted to work, breathe, and slowly put herself back together. As evening approached, the sky turned golden, and the ranch looked even more beautiful under the setting sun. Elena sat quietly on the porch steps, hugging her knees and watching the sky change colors. A soft breeze carried the scent of grass and warm soil. Everything felt different here, not perfect, but peaceful. Her mind wandered to her past for a moment, but she gently pushed the memories away. She didn't want to unpack those emotions right now. She wanted to focus on the present, the calm surroundings, the open land, and the chance to start again. She told herself she wouldn't trust anyone too quickly here. She wouldn't open her heart again. She would stay quiet, do her work, and rebuild her strength. She promised herself she wouldn't repeat her old mistakes or fall into another cycle of disappointment. But even as she made those promises, she didn't know that the ranch held more than just peace. It held people who would shape her journey, moments that would challenge her fears, and someone whose presence would slowly change her heart in ways she didn't expect. For now, though, Elena simply sat in silence, watching the sunset in a town that didn't know her name, her past, or her pain. And for the first time in a very long time, she felt the possibility of hope gently touch her heart. The next morning, Elena woke before sunrise, unsure if it was excitement, nervousness, or simply the unfamiliar silence that pushed her out of bed. She dressed quickly, tied her hair back, and stepped outside into the cool morning air. The sky was still dark, but a faint silver glow touched the horizon. Everything felt calm, as if the world was slowly waking up with her. As she walked toward the barn, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned and saw a tall figure approaching from the other side of the ranch. He moved with a steady, relaxed pace, the kind that came from years of working outdoors. His hat rested low on his forehead, shadowing most of his face, but she could still see the calmness in the way he carried himself. This was the cowboy she had heard Mrs. Avery mention Cole. They crossed paths near the stable doors. He stopped a few steps away from her, nodded politely, and spoke in a voice that was deep but gentle. "You must be Elena." She nodded back, surprised by how carefully he spoke her name, as if making sure he said it correctly. "Yes. And you're Cole?" "Right." He removed one glove and held out his hand. "Welcome to the ranch." Elena shook his hand lightly. His touch was firm but respectful, not lingering longer than needed. He wasn't the type to stare too long or make someone uncomfortable. His presence was steady, like the ground itself, solid, grounded, and quiet. For a moment, they stood in silence. And surprisingly, it didn't feel awkward. Cole seemed like someone who didn't rush conversations. He spoke only when needed and didn't push for more. Elena appreciated that more than she could explain. He gestured toward the stable. "Come on, Mrs. Avery said I should show you the morning routine." Elena followed him as he led her through the barn. The horses were awake, shifting and snorting softly in their stalls. The smell of hay and warm animals filled the air, and sunlight slowly began to filter in through the open doors. Cole started with the basics: how to feed the horses, how to clean the stalls, how to check if the animals were healthy. He moved with practiced ease, showing her each step with calm patience. Elena watched him closely, mimicking his actions, trying her best not to fall behind. At one point, she struggled to lift a heavy bucket of feed. She tried again, but it slipped slightly. Before she could try a third time, Cole stepped forward and placed his hand lightly on the side of the bucket. "Let me help," he said simply. He didn't laugh at her or point out her weakness. He didn't speak to her like she was helpless. He just helped in the most natural, respectful way possible. Elena felt a quiet gratitude warm her chest. "I'll get used to it," she said, trying to smile. "You will," Cole replied, and for a moment, it seemed like he actually believed in her strength more than she did. As they continued working, Elena noticed small things about him. He didn't talk much, but when he did, his words carried sincerity. He took care of the animals with gentle hands, especially the older horse named Daisy. He paused to scratch behind her ears, whispering something that made the horse nudge him affectionately. Elena found herself smiling at the sight. Outside the barn, the sun had fully risen now, casting soft golden light across the fields. Cole asked her to follow him to the fencing area. They walked side by side, with only the sound of crunching gravel beneath their boots. Elena realized she hadn't felt uncomfortable around a man in a very long time, but with Cole, she felt unexpectedly at ease. When they reached the fence, he handed her an old pair of leather gloves. "Use these," he said. "They'll protect your hands until you get your own." Elena stared at them for a moment. The gloves were worn but clean, obviously used by him many times before. She accepted them with a quiet thank you. "Don't worry about being new," he said casually as he started working on the fence. "Everyone starts somewhere." The simplicity of those words touched her deeply. No judgment. No assumptions. No curiosity about her past. Just an honest reassurance. They worked together for hours, fixing wooden panels, checking the nails, replacing broken pieces. Cole explained things patiently, never raising his voice or showing frustration. Elena tried to keep up, but she made a few mistakes. Each time, Cole corrected her gently, without making her feel small. At midday, they finally took a break. They sat under a large oak tree near the field, the shade shielding them from the warm sun. Mrs. Avery had packed sandwiches for them, and Cole handed Elena one without a word. For a few minutes, they ate in silence. But this silence wasn't heavy or tense. It was peaceful, like a quiet understanding between two people who didn't need to fill every moment with conversation. After finishing her food, Elena glanced at Cole and said softly, "I'm sorry if I slowed you down today." Cole looked at her with a calm expression. "You didn't slow me down. You're learning. That's all it is. But I made mistakes. That's part of learning too." His simple responses had a way of easing her worries. She wasn't used to kindness that didn't expect something in return. She wasn't used to a man who didn't judge her or make her feel less. There was something different about Cole. Something steady, honest, and patient. Something she hadn't experienced in years. After the break, they continued working. The afternoon passed smoothly, and Elena found herself growing more comfortable, not just with the work, but with Cole's presence. Whenever she struggled, he stepped in quietly, offering guidance. Whenever she did something right, he nodded approvingly, though he rarely used many words. By the time the sun dipped low again, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, they were heading back toward the ranch house. As they walked, Cole glanced at her and asked, "How's your first day?" "Tiring," Elena admitted with a laugh. "But good." He gave a small smile. "Good." They slowed as they approached the house. Something unspoken hung gently in the air, like the early form of trust. Elena didn't feel nervous around him. She didn't feel guarded. She didn't feel the need to hide her thoughts. His steady presence made her feel safe, not in a dramatic way, but in a quiet, real way. Before they parted for the evening, Cole tipped his hat slightly and said, "I'll see you in the morning." Elena nodded, feeling a warmth she didn't expect. "Good night, Cole." "Good night." She watched him walk toward the barn, the glow of the sunset outlining his silhouette. There was something about him, something comforting, something calm that pulled a small piece of her heart awake. She hadn't come here looking for connection. She hadn't wanted to trust anyone again. But Cole's kindness was different. It wasn't loud. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't demanding. It simply existed, quietly, like a soft light that made the shadows of her past feel less heavy. As she entered her room and closed the door behind her, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not the dramatic kind, not the kind that promises miracles, just a gentle, steady hope that maybe this place and this cowboy would help her rebuild the parts of herself she thought were gone forever. The days passed gently on the ranch, and Elena slowly settled into a new rhythm. Each morning began with the same routine, waking before sunrise, stepping outside into the cool, fresh air, and meeting Cole near the barn. What surprised her most was how natural everything began to feel. The work was tiring, sometimes overwhelming, But the peace around her made it easier to breathe. And then there was Cole. With his quiet strength and steady presence. He didn't try to impress her. He didn't speak more than necessary. Yet every day, through small actions, he showed her a kind of respect and kindness she had forgotten existed. One morning, as they worked side by side brushing the horses, Cole asked her softly, "How are you sleeping these days?" Elena hesitated for a moment. No one had asked her that in months, not in a real, caring way. "I'm sleeping better," she said honestly. "The quiet helps." Cole nodded. "Quiet's good for the mind." She paused, then asked gently, "Do you like quiet?" He smiled a little. A small, warm curve of his lips. "Sometimes. But not when it comes from loneliness." She felt his words settle in her chest like a soft stone. She didn't ask more. She didn't want to push him the way people once pushed her. Instead, they continued brushing the horses in peaceful silence. Later that week, they spent an afternoon organizing the hay storage in the barn. It was warm inside, and Elena kept stopping to wipe sweat from her forehead. Cole worked steadily, but he kept glancing at her to make sure she wasn't overworking herself. At one point, she tried lifting a bale of hay that was clearly too heavy for her. She struggled, her arms trembling. But she didn't want to ask for help. She wanted to prove she was strong enough. Cole noticed immediately. He walked over and stood beside her. "You don't have to do everything alone," he said gently. She looked at him, breathless from effort. "I'm trying." "And you're doing good," he said. "But everyone needs help sometimes." He lifted the bale easily, his muscles moving effortlessly under his shirt. But he didn't boast or act proud. He just placed it where it belonged and stepped back, giving her space. The warmth that filled her chest wasn't from the temperature, it was from his kindness. His steady way of guiding her without making her feel weak. As the days turned into weeks, Elena began opening up in small ways. She told him she liked writing in her journal. Though she didn't mention the heavy stories it held, she shared how the city life drained her, how the noise kept her awake at night, and how she always felt she didn't belong anywhere. Cole listened quietly, sometimes nodding, sometimes offering gentle replies. "You belong somewhere peaceful," he said once, his voice thoughtful. "You carry too much silence in your eyes. Peace might help." "Come." His words touched her in a way she didn't expect. She didn't know how he understood her so well when she barely understood herself. One evening, after finishing their work early, Cole invited her to ride one of the horses. Elena had practiced a little since arriving, but she still felt nervous. Cole chose a calm horse named Willow for her and guided her through every step: how to hold the reins, how to sit straight, how to trust the horse's movements. "You're doing good," he said after she took a few slow laps around the field. "Only because you're helping me," she replied. "That's what people do when they care," he said simply. The words caught her off guard. She almost forgot how to breathe. But Cole didn't seem to notice the effect they had on her. He walked beside Willow, one hand gently on the horse's side, ensuring Elena felt safe the whole time. As they rode along the field, the sky turning orange behind them, Elena felt something shift inside her. A quiet warmth. A soft spark of trust. She didn't want to hold on to it, but she couldn't stop it either. That night, she lay in bed, thinking about how comfortable she felt around him. There was no fear, no hesitation. His calm presence made her feel safe. And she didn't know what to do with that feeling. The next day, a storm rolled in unexpectedly. Dark clouds gathered over the ranch, and the wind grew stronger. Elena had always been uneasy during storms. She didn't like the loud thunder or the unpredictable flashes of lightning. It reminded her of nights when she felt trapped in her own life, surrounded by noise she could not escape. She tried to keep working, pretending she wasn't scared. But when a loud crack of thunder shook the ground, she froze beside the barn doors, her heart beating fast. Cole noticed instantly. "You all right?" he asked as he walked toward her. She nodded quickly, but her eyes gave away her fear. Another loud rumble echoed across the fields. Elena flinched, her breath catching in her throat. Without saying anything, Cole opened the barn door wider and gestured inside. "Come on," he said gently. We'll wait it out together. Elena followed him into the barn. The animals shifted nervously, but Cole's calm voice soothed them as he checked their stalls. Then he returned to her, noticing her trembling hands. Sit here, he said, guiding her to a stack of hay bales. He sat beside her, not too close, but close enough that she felt protected. The rain hit the roof loudly. Thunder growled outside. But inside the barn, Cole's presence felt like a shield. Storms don't last long, he said quietly. I know, she whispered, but they still scare me. It's okay to be scared, he replied. You don't have to hide it. His voice was calm, gentle, steady, everything she needed in that moment. Elena looked at him. She wanted to tell him why storms scared her, why loud noises brought back old memories, why sudden flashes of light reminded her of moments she tried to forget, but she couldn't speak the words. Not yet. Cole didn't ask her to explain. He didn't push or question. He simply stayed beside her, talking softly about the horses, the ranch, the sunsets, anything that could distract her from the storm outside, and slowly, her breathing calmed. When the thunder softened and the rain turned into a gentle drizzle, Cole glanced at her and said, See? Storm's almost gone. Elena nodded. For the first time in years, she didn't go through a storm alone. As they walked out of the barn together, Elena felt a deep appreciation for him. He didn't just help her with ranch work. He helped her with her fears. He helped her feel seen without demanding her story. That evening, Elena wrote in her journal, He listens without pushing. He helps without judging. He stays without asking for anything. Maybe trust can grow again slowly. She closed the journal and pressed her hand over her heart. She wasn't falling quickly. She wasn't rushing anything, but she couldn't deny that something was happening, something soft, something careful, something real. Cole was slowly becoming a part of her healing. Not through big gestures, but through small moments that made her feel safe again. And she didn't know where it would lead. But for the first time, in a long time, she was willing to find out. The days after the storm felt different, as if something small but important had shifted between Elena and Cole. They still worked side by side, still spoke in the same gentle, uncomplicated way. But now there was a quiet closeness that hadn't been there before. It wasn't something they talked about. It wasn't something they openly acknowledged. It was simply there, like a soft current in the air, that only they could feel. Elena noticed it first in the small things. When they walked together, their steps fell into an easy rhythm. When she struggled with a task, Cole noticed before she even said a word. When she laughed, he watched her for a second longer, as if storing the sound in his memory. He didn't flirt. He didn't use fancy words. He just existed around her with a warmth that made her heart feel lighter each day. One evening, after finishing the chores, the sky glowed with soft shades of peach and gold. Mrs. Avery suggested they take a short ride before sunset to check a far fence that had been slightly damaged in the storm. Elena agreed, feeling excited for reasons she didn't want to name. Cole prepared the horses, and when Elena approached, he handed her Willow's reins with a gentle smile. You ready? He asked. I think so, she replied, trying not to show how her heart was already beating faster. They mounted their horses and began riding through the open field. The breeze was light, carrying the smell of fresh grass and damp earth. The sun was lowering slowly, painting everything with a warm, glowing light. It felt as if the whole world had softened just for them. They rode in comfortable silence at first, listening to the sound of hooves on the ground. Elena watched the sky change colors, feeling peaceful in a way she rarely felt before. After a few minutes, Cole slowed his horse so that they were riding side by side. You've gotten better at riding, he said calmly. Elena smiled. Only because you taught me. I just guided you, he replied. You did the work. His simple honesty made her chest warm. She liked the way he spoke. No exaggeration, no empty praise. Just truth, spoken with kindness. They reached the fence and checked it together. Cole fixed the loose section while Elena held a small lantern to give him enough light. When he finished, he dusted off his hands and nodded toward the horizon. Still some sunlight left, he said. Want to ride a little more? Elena hesitated only for a moment before saying, yes. They guided the horses toward a small hill at the edge of the ranch. It wasn't high, but from the top, they could see the entire field stretching out beneath the fading sky. When they reached the hill, they dismounted and let the horses rest. Elena stepped closer to the edge, feeling the cool breeze brush against her skin. The view was breathtaking, endless fields, glowing sky, and the quiet world settling peacefully into night. It's beautiful, she whispered. It is, Cole replied, but he wasn't looking at the view, he was looking at her. She didn't notice at first. She was too busy studying the sky, breathing in the calm, letting it fill the empty spaces inside her. But when she finally turned her head, she caught him watching her with a softness she had never seen in anyone's eyes before. It startled her not in a frightening way, but in a way that made her heart stumble. She didn't look away. Neither did he. They stood there for a long moment, the quiet evening holding them in a gentle stillness. Cole seemed as if he wanted to speak but wasn't sure how to begin. He shifted slightly, his hand brushing against his shirt, as if looking for courage. Elena, he said quietly. Yes, she replied, her voice equally soft. I want to say something, but I don't want to make you uncomfortable. She felt her heartbeat quicken, but she stepped a little closer. You won't. Cole took a breath, looking down for a moment before meeting her eyes again. You're strong, he said. Stronger than you think. I see it every day. And I've grown to care about you. More than I expected. More than I planned. 3. Elena's breath caught. She didn't know what to say at first. His words weren't dramatic or rehearsed. They were simple, sincere, and spoken with a quiet heart. She felt something inside her unlock, something she had kept sealed for far too long. Cole, she began, her voice trembling slightly. I care about you too. I didn't plan it either. The wind brushed around them, gentle and warm, as if encouraging them to take the next step neither had dared before. Cole took one slow step toward her. He didn't rush. He didn't assume. He waited, giving her all the space to move closer or step away. Elena looked into his eyes, and in that moment, she saw everything she hadn't found in anyone else. Safety, patience, honesty, and a softness that made her feel seen in a way no one had ever made her feel. She stepped forward, just one step, but it was enough. They stood inches apart now, breathing the same quiet air, feeling a bond stronger than words. Elena, he whispered, can I? He didn't finish. He didn't need to. She closed the distance gently, placing her hand on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. Cole froze for a second. Not out of fear, but out of the tenderness of the moment. Then Elena lifted her face toward his. She kissed him. It was soft, slow, and full of emotion she had held inside for too long. Cole responded carefully, as if afraid to break the fragile trust that had grown between them. His hands rested lightly near her arms, not pulling, not gripping, just offering comfort. When the kiss ended, they stood there in quiet stillness, eyes closed for a moment, as if letting the feeling sink in. Elena leaned closer, her lips near his ear, her voice barely above a whisper. Make me forget every man before you. Her words were not about erasing her past. They were about letting go of the pain, the disappointment, the hurt she had carried. They were about choosing a new beginning with him. Cole swallowed hard, emotion tightening his throat. He didn't make promises he couldn't keep. He didn't say big things. He simply gently squeezed her hand and whispered back, I'll help you heal, one day at a time. No grand declarations, no dramatic speeches, just sincerity. They stayed on that hill until the last light faded from the sky. They talked softly about small things, shared quiet smiles, and allowed their hearts to rest in the new connection they had formed. When they finally walked back to the ranch, side by side, their shoulders brushed, now and then, not by accident, but naturally, as if they had always walked this close. Elena felt different, lighter, softer, and more hopeful than she had in years. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew one thing for sure. Cole wasn't just a calm cowboy anymore. He was someone her heart was slowly learning to trust. And she knew, deep inside, that this was only the beginning. The morning sun rose slowly over the ranch, painting the sky with soft shades of orange and pink. The light touched the wooden fences, the old barn, and the open fields, where the horses ran freely. Everything looked calm, almost peaceful, as if the world itself wanted to witness the moment that was about to unfold. Ava stood near the porch, holding a warm cup of tea in her hands. She watched the sunrise quietly, trying to steady her thoughts. The last few days had changed her life in ways she never expected. She had come to the ranch with a heart full of pain and memories she wanted to forget. Yet she had found something far deeper than she imagined. She had found peace. She had found courage. And she had found someone who made her feel understood after a very long time. A soft breeze touched her face, carrying the smell of grass and morning dew. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting it calm her. She knew today would decide everything. James had said he needed to talk to her, and she knew that talk could shape both of their futures. She took a long breath, wondering what he would say and what choice she herself was ready to make. Her heart was steady, yet hopeful. Behind her, the wooden floor of the porch creaked. Ava turned and saw James walking toward her with his slow, familiar, steady steps. His hat was in his hand, and his expression was gentle, but serious. It was the look of a man carrying words that mattered. She felt her heart move in her chest, not in fear, but in anticipation. He came close and stood beside her, watching the sunrise for a moment before speaking. "You're up early," he said softly. "I couldn't sleep," she replied. "Too many thoughts." "Same here," he admitted, placing his hat on the railing. There was a long silence between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was only a pause, an opening, a moment where the truth waited. Ava looked at him, and he looked at her, both knowing the conversation they had been avoiding all night was finally here. James took a breath. "Ava, I know you've been through a lot. I know you didn't come here looking for anything. You just needed a place to breathe again. And I never wanted to make things harder for you." "You didn't," she said quickly. "You helped me heal." He glanced at her with warm eyes. "Maybe. But I also know you don't want to rush into anything. And I don't want to be another memory you try to forget later." His voice was steady, but there was real emotion behind it. Ava felt it. She stepped closer. "You're not something I want to forget." He looked at her fully then, searching her expression. "Ava, I want to know how you feel. Truly feel. Not out of fear, not because you're trying to escape your past, but because you're ready for something real." Ava swallowed hard. She had been preparing for this moment, yet her heart still raced. She looked at the sunrise again, gathering strength. She had spent years carrying stories that she wished she could erase. She had spent nights wondering if she would ever feel safe again. But something had changed here. Something deep. "I came here trying to run from everything," she said softly. "I wanted to leave behind all the hurt, all the confusion, all the mistakes. I thought if I stayed busy, stayed far away, maybe the past would disappear." James listened without interrupting, his eyes steady on her. "But it didn't disappear," she continued. "It followed me everywhere, and I thought I would never feel anything good again. Not honestly. Not fully." Her voice trembled, but she didn't stop. "But then, you came into my life like a quiet answer. You didn't try to fix me. You didn't try to carry my pain for me. You just stood beside me. You let me breathe. You let me laugh again. You made me feel alive in a way I didn't even realize I had lost." James's eyes grew soft. Ava smiled gently, wiping the corner of her eye. "And when I said those words to you, when I told you to make me forget every man before you, I didn't mean it as a wish or a request. I meant it because for the first time in years, I felt something pure, something real." James looked down for a moment, as if holding her words carefully. Then he nodded. "I understand." Ava touched his arm. I'm not trying to replace the past with something new. I just want to build a future that feels true. And when I look at you, I see that future." A long, gentle silence stretched between them. James took a breath and stepped closer, his voice low. "Ava, I don't know what the future holds. I'm just a simple man who works with horses and tries to do right by the people he cares about. But I know this: if you choose to stay, I'll do everything I can to make sure you never feel alone again." Her heart warmed instantly. She felt the truth in every word he said. James wasn't promising perfection. He wasn't trying to be a hero. He was offering honesty, steadiness, and care, the things she needed the most. Ava nodded slowly. "I want to stay." For a moment, James simply breathed out, as if a quiet weight lifted from him. He reached out and held her hand gently, almost carefully, as if making sure she truly wanted it. She squeezed his hand back, letting him know she did. They stood there together, watching the sun climb higher. The world around them glowed. The fields, shining with morning light, birds began to sing, and the horses moved toward the fences, as if welcoming the new day. Ava felt something inside her settle, something soft, warm, and grounding. She realized she was no longer running. She was no longer hiding. She was choosing her path. Later that morning, they walked through the ranch side by side. Every part of the ranch held a memory. Now, moments of fear, moments of laughter, moments of discovery. They reached the barn, where the horses were beginning to stir. James opened the gate, and Ava stepped inside to pet one of the gentle mares. The horse nudged her shoulder softly, and Ava smiled. "You're getting along well with them," James said, leaning on the wooden frame. "I think they understand me," she said with a small laugh. "Or maybe they're just kind." "Both," he replied. Ava walked out of the barn and joined him. They were quiet for a moment, taking in the scene: the golden fields, the peaceful animals, the calm sky. Everything felt like the start of something new. "James," she said softly. She looked up at him with a brave, gentle expression. "Thank you for giving me a place to start again." He touched the brim of his hat, smiling. "Thank you for choosing to stay." The day passed slowly and beautifully. They worked together, talked, shared smiles, and built moments that felt like stepping stones toward a future they were both willing to create. Ava felt lighter with every hour. James felt grateful with every glance at her. Both of them understood that life could change at any moment. But they also knew that healing didn't come from forgetting it. Came from choosing what to carry forward, and they were choosing each other. As the sun set behind the hills, painting the sky in gold once more, Ava stood beside James near the fence line. She rested her head gently against his shoulder. He wrapped an arm around her. Steady and warm, the world was quiet, and their hearts were calm. There was no fear, no rush, no uncertainty, only a soft understanding that the past no longer controlled her story. She had stepped into a new chapter with courage, and James had opened a door she never expected. Ava whispered quietly, not as a plea, but as a promise to herself, "I'm ready for this." James nodded. "So am I." The wind moved through the tall grass. A new beginning had arrived, soft, simple, and real. And for the first time in a long while, Ava wasn't trying to forget anyone. She was finally remembering herself.